Hi guys, Frank here with Tiny Plastic Spaceman, and in this video I'm going to answer your questions that you have for me about Games Workshop contrast paints. Now, I got a lot of really good questions and comments about the contrast paints that were debuted this past weekend at Warhammer Fest here in England. Now, Warhammer Fest is a really big thing for Games Workshop. It's basically replaced their Games Day event, so there's gaming and all sorts of things. Contrast was their big, well, one of their really big announcements over the weekend, and obviously it affects, or it could affect, a lot of gamers and painters out there. And when I say gamers, I mean board gamers as well. There's lots of board game folks that have been commenting on the video, which has been fantastic. I have tons of board games and lots of unpainted board game models like Zombicide, Black Plague, Kingdom Death, all kinds of stuff. So it's been really good to see a real mix of people from positives to negatives, and board gamers to war gamers, and I don't know if any pro painters have commented on there, but there's been a lot of people. It's been all mostly positive, but anyway, it's been mostly positive. So it's been good to see, and I did get asked on one of the Facebook groups I shared the video link to. Is it just going to be another sycophantic "We love Games Workshop" product review, in air quotes, and I don't think it was. I mean, you let me know. I don't think it was sycophantic, really. I mean, you know, at the end, I have proposed ideas on how to make your own. So, and that will be coming in a future video. I've been trying out some things, and we'll see what comes out and what seems to work best, or similar to the contrast stuff. But anyway, I wanted to go through and read some of the comments and questions that I had, especially. Now, a lot of the comments I replied to directly to the people, but, you know, a lot of people may not see other replies to other people's comments. So I figured, why not do a video and we'll go over it and see what happens. So we'll start at the top. I've got a list of a bunch of different comments and questions. So starting with a few comments first. First is, I think this will be really good for board games like Descent or the new Lord of the Rings game. This is from Nicholas Lowe. If you want to just quickly get some paint on the models, but still have it look good. Exactly. That's, you know, it's Games Workshop is about making things easier to paint. It's not about making things harder to do, because they sell unpainted models and they sell paint. They want you to buy both, plus their brushes and their paint cup and all, you know, the model holder and all that stuff. So they don't want to make it harder for you to paint, because you're not going to be buying their paints. And also, it's an advertisement for their own stuff. If you're buying a Games Workshop model, a game, and both sides of the table have just a mass of gray unpainted models, it's not going to look good for the game. It's not going to look good for the wargaming in general, and the hobby, you know, as Games Workshop likes to call it. But yeah, it's all about getting painted models on the table, whether it's a board game or a skirmish game or a full apocalypse game. Benja says, can't wait to paint my board game minis with this system. Thanks for the good info. You're welcome. A lot of people, I had a lot of really good comments saying thanks for the information, and thanking me by subscribing, which has been awesome. And so, you know, you're welcome. Ultramarine says, man, this would make Imperial Fists really easy to paint. First of all, Imperial Fists? Your name is Ultramarine. Second of all, yes, it would make Imperial Fists very easy to paint. You know, you can imagine, it's very similar to just painting the model yellow and then doing a very light wash of brown, and then doing another wash of brown, and another wash of brown, and another wash of brown. But in this case, you're doing it on gray or a very off-white, and you just put some yellow on it. There you go, done. And a reply to Ultramarine says, I hope so. Maybe just a quick cleanup and some edge highlights. That's from Intercore. That is exactly it. That is exactly what the system is meant to be. And, ideally not even a quick cleanup. You may not even have to do that. Now, some of the example models that I showed in the previous video, there was some, I wouldn't call it pulling, but heavy accumulations of the contrast color on some areas where there really shouldn't be heavy accumulations. But for tabletop standard, totally fine. For a display quality model or a heavy metal Golden Demon sort of entry, no, of course not. It's not going to be great. But for a tabletop standard, absolutely fine. So, continuing, Corona says, I really think painting with translucent inks and washes, etc. is hugely underrated. Going from using washes as a detail step to just painting entire models with them was a major breakthrough for my own painting. Exactly. And again, on top of that, you can put the detail stuff like eyes, trim, metal on weapons and things like that. That's, or you can paint the entire thing with contrast or glazes or washes or however you like. And Corona continues, it's great that GW is going deeper into these paint types. For beginners, it means they can get their army tabletop ready in much less time. I agree completely. For veterans, it's just another tool for the toolkit. Experimenting with different approaches to painting can really broaden your range. Again, completely agree with that comment there from Corona. Josh Gifford says, really well put together vid. Thank you very much. I'm glad you liked it. Just an FYI, De La Rowney and FW are the same company. I did not know that, so that's news to me. They come in the same bottles, and they're just sold in different shops. That's all. So Stewie Gurr says, it's a Stormcast Terminator. I'm not sure he's exactly right, because Terminator is a 40K. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just going to say he's correct. Thanks. Thanks for the info. Again, you're welcome. Very much interested in these, because I'm disabled and can't really paint at all. A lot of wargamers have, especially, carpal tunnel syndrome or RSI or in some other way are unable to paint in the traditional method that a lot of really experienced painters who have absolutely no disabilities at all are able to paint with. So, anything that makes it easier, gets more painted models on the table, makes games look better, right? And it brings more people into the hobby. CC says, you just explained why I keep getting gritty white spray paints. Thank you so much. I'm just passing on the info. That's what I believe his name is Dave from the Games Workshop hobby department, I think is what it is. He's the one who gave the talk and gave the explanation. He uses the analogy of footballs or soccer balls or basketballs, if you like, as the minimum size, for example, scaled up, obviously, of the titanium dioxide pigment particles. And all of the other pigments can be made much, much smaller. You imagine a swimming pool full of basketballs or soccer balls, or footballs if you're in England, and all that space in between, you'll be able to see right through them. In some cases, right, if it's shallow enough, you can see right through to the surface, the bottom of the pool, for example, in this case. And if you fill all that up with marbles or golf balls, you get the analogy, right? So anyway, that's what his explanation, and maybe it's completely out of scale, but the explanation was that these very large paint particles are floating through the air on their way to the model, and they're drying in midair, and then that's why they dry, they hit other paint particles, and they just hit with a massive big lump, and that's why you have gritty paint. So that's the information. So Daniel Fioretti, though, replied to CC's comment, says, I think there's a bit more to it than the size of the white pigment. Titanium dioxide tends to be several hundred nanometers across if it is to be used as a pigment. That's over 100 times smaller than the diameter of a hair. A nanometer is, I think, is a billionth of a meter, so very, very small. I'd be more concerned about any matting agents put in to degloss the paint, as those tend to be significantly larger. Again, it was a seminar given to probably 200 or 300 people, the Science of Paint seminar that I mentioned. No one, I don't think anyone in the audience was probably any sort of chemical or paint expert, and when you have the head of a department who is probably not a chemist either, explaining it to other non-chemists, it has to be put in some sort of terms that people can understand. Okay, so now some questions about how the actual contrast paint works. Now I did make a little bit of a mistake. I did record a couple of bits of footage that I'll include in this piece, and a little bit of voiceover that will hopefully explain a few things that because I did forget, or I did miss putting this in the previous video. So first of all, Jeans4484 asks, from what I've seen, contrast would probably be a good idea for gradient areas like face and cape, not the flat surface like power armor. Imperial Fist model in the clip has many darker areas on the flat surface where it should be flat, even color all around. It depends. Part of that for me kind of depends on the look that you're going for. If you're going for a brand new recruit or a freshly repainted champion's armor or something like that, yes, perfectly flat and unshaded, almost cell shaded, you know, like the old Robotech or Gundam shows, cartoons. That can be a style. But if you're going for shade, then use the contrast stuff. If you want to go for what I call the cartoony look, which is the sort of traditional Games Workshop army painter sort of look, maybe from a few years ago probably, that sort of cartoony look, as I call it, is quite unshaded. It's only shaded in the very recesses and you know, just accentuated with the edge highlighting, you know. So it depends what you want. You know, if you want, you know, and again, there's no one stopping you from using your traditional paints. You just don't have to buy the contrast paints. Kurt Bell says, do you have to use that specific base coat for the contrast paint to work? No. And I believe the speaker in the Science of Paint seminar said that, you know, anything will work. They formulated these spray paints, meaning they've gone to their spray paint supplier and said, we need this color and this color. We don't want white. We want a little bit like this and a little bit like this. And then they probably got 10 or 20 or 50 samples of spray paints of varying levels of light gray and light beige, and decided, okay, we're going to go with this for Gracier and this for Wraithbone, I think is what they call it. So GoTrek1989 asks, what if you've already undercoated with Chaos Black spray? Do you need the contrast spray for the paints to work? Yeah, these aren't going to work over black. At worst, I suppose at worst, just paint your model in the normal way using your normal paints. And we'll get to this in a minute, but these aren't paints. They're inks. I'm pretty sure anyway. So the other thing you could do, if you do want to just go straight in and try it with a whole new bunch of models, this paint system, use the contrast spray, but spray in a zenithal sort of format, which means you have your model, spray paint the whole thing black, even the undersides, and then use the contrast spray and spray it from a 45-degree angle like this from all the way around. So basically anything that's going to be in shadow is an extreme shadow, so you have even more contrast over, you know, in the under part of an arm, say, or underneath the chin. There's going to be only like little tiny flecks of the light colored paint. It's not going to be completely black, but it's not going to be completely the same color as, say, the top of the head, right? Death Guard Dave Googly, great name, says, thanks, great information. Again, you're welcome. I paint mainly 6mm scale infantry and tanks. Wow. Okay, first of all. Do you think it would work well, or will the thick paint spoil and blob the models? And I replied to Dave on the directly in the comments. I don't think this is going to work that great for 6mm scale. 6mm scale is 1/5 the height, ish, roughly, of a normal Space Marine, and actually slightly smaller, because Space Marine's meant to be what, like 8 feet high or something like that. So in that case, I would just stick with what you have. For, you know, like really small scale, like 15, 10, 8, 6 mil size, you know, like Adeptus Titanicus size. But that's just me. I mean, obviously try it if you want. But I would just use, if you're going to paint a face at 6mm scale, it's about 2mm high at most, maybe 1mm high. And it's just going to be flesh tone paint and a light sepia wash or something like that. I did suggest to Dave in the comments when I replied to him directly that if you already do paint 30 mil or 20, anywhere from 28 to 32 mil scale models already, get the brown wash, something that will be, or the brown contrast, and something that you are pretty sure you're going to be using on the larger scale models. And that way, if it doesn't work on the 6mm scale, then you can still use it, because otherwise these are going to be about £4.75 each, which is, I don't even know how much that is in dollars. It'll be about $6 or $7 per pot. Salvador Madrigal says, so is it like an ink? I'm pretty sure that it is inks that make up the color. Because Dave, I believe, was the chap's first name, he did mention several times, the more you put it on, the deeper it gets. The more you put it on, the deeper it gets. Now, similar to the Badger Miniature ghost tints and candy colors and inks in general, the more you put it on, it's a translucent, it's not even a pigment, it's an ink, but it's a translucent color. So the more you put on, the darker that will get. So that tells me inks. I mean, they're not reinventing the wheel here. They're just making it a portion of the wheel easier for people to use. Bjorn Brent's Bonten. Bjorn Brent's Bonten. Nice vid. Thank you. Wonder if I could use this on any models, characters and such with some help from metallics. Now, I did put in the video, I didn't get video of it, and I should have gotten more pictures of it, but there was just one sample squad of Heresy-era Space Marines that were on display. And those were coated in lead belcher and painted over that with the contrast purple. Now, of course, there's going to be 2 or 3 different purples, but it looked pretty good. So maybe you missed it in the last video, but have a look at it here, and you can see it's pretty decent, really. Fluttershy says, these are going to be awesome for base coating. I totally agree. You can achieve the same result with several super translucent glazes over beige and white, but this seems like a way to do it in one coat with no coffee staining. And coffee staining is some people's term for the tide marks that you get around the dried edges of washes. So again, that is exactly it. The idea with this is you literally, they have a pin that says one thick coat, because for at least 2 or 3 years now, ever since the Warhammer community has really taken off, Duncan, from one of the main painters, the main video guy for Warhammer community, has been saying two thin coats, and he's made a series of videos about joking about 2 thin coats. Oh, I'm not cold, I've got 2 thin coats on, right? You may have seen it, you may not have, but anyway, they've been hammering this point for years in their painting videos and their community videos. So 2 thin coats always, and now their thing is 1 thick coat. So, I mean, it'll be funny to see what sort of reaction video they do, joking reaction video they do for Duncan. But that's their whole point with this, is to make it even easier. So it's 2 thin coats, and do it the way they've been telling you to do it for years with their paint system is, very particular. Or here's 1 thick coat. Now, Sturmhawk asks, is the use of a paint palette recommended, or do you use them straight from the pot? You use these straight from the pot, and I tried to show in the video where I was actually painting them how much paint you're actually meant to use. Now, that was what the demo guy showed me. There were 2 or 3 demo people sort of servicing about 20 or 25 people at different, like a circle of tables. And they would repeat the same sort of spiel to everybody. Here's what you do: long strokes, dip it, don't wipe it, don't thin it with water, just whack it on. And that's what you do. Now, I did note that and I didn't mention this really, that if you let it dry just a bit, like the section that you were painting, and you go back and try to touch up something, it dries that quickly, or at least, you know, and again, we were inside. It dries that quickly that you kind of mess up the paint. Now, in the example model that I showed, the Stormcast guy, whether it was because I touched the outer bit of the cape, but I think it was because I had to toss them in my bag because I was late for a seminar. I stayed about 10 or 20 minutes too late at this at the painting tables. So I just tossed the models in the bag. So that's not a fault of the paint or the contrast stuff or anything. That's just, it wasn't completely dry when I put it in my bag to rush off to a seminar. So now a couple of questions on how it's made, on top of the ink question from previous. So Garrett says, are they just selling washes again with different names? I remember when they did this with glazes. It's not exactly a wash. It's a thick wash, which is meant to, on the sharp edges of, say, this Stormcast Eternal's leg, it comes off of that sharp edge, creates the highlight, and then in the recesses, it pulls there, for lack of a better term. It doesn't actually pull like a wash would, but it collects in the creases and the undersides of cloaks and faces and skins and stuff like that, and makes the color deeper. On the way in between the pointy highlight and the recess area, it's stained the undercoat, either the gray or the beige or whatever color you end up using. So it is kind of a wash, but they're not calling it a wash. It's a system. So take that however you want, but that's how it works. And it does work. Don't get me wrong. It's just different. So it's a little hard to explain in some terms. Maxon99 asks, sounds like they reinvented painting with inks over light base coat. Now, this was covered previously. Nothing wrong with that. They actually do a lot of work perfecting the formulas for miniature painting. E.g., GW washes are not just watered down inks or paint. Exactly. You know, in the talk, and I kind of had a little joke with this in my WhatsApp chat with my other gaming buddies. In the Science of Paint talk, when it got to the crackle paints, like the Agrellan Earth and the Martian Iron Earth, I think they're called, there was a little bit of back padding about, oh, we developed this paint and this and that. Well, it's crackle medium with pigment, which you can buy crackle medium at any arts and crafts store or online, Amazon, eBay, whatever, or your favorite scale model shop or whatever. But it's crackle medium with paint, and you can mix your own. They made it easier by putting the same exact color in thousands and thousands of pots in hundreds and thousands of stores, so that when you go into one shop in California and you go into another shop in London, it's the exact same color. Rather than mixing it and going, oh, how many drops did I put in that last one? Okay, well, they made it easier. It's the system. So now, I'm going to wrap it up. Probably not the wisest way to wrap it up, but wrap it up with some really interesting comments. Brian Lechian says, it's not better than painting with either inks, glazes, or shades over a zenithal frame model. Not new or exciting. Change my mind. If you've got a system that you like, who's going to force you to buy contrast paints? Mateusz Sikorsky says, so it's just paint for people interested in playing part of the hobby rather than painting. Yeah. If that's what they want to do, sure. Get fast results and not play with gray plastic, which I get. Okay. Or something for newbies, though I wouldn't recommend this for beginners. Why not? It's an easy solution / fix for people who just play the game and nobody learns from fast solutions or fixes. I would argue that's fine. It's a hobby, and there's multiple facets to the hobby. a lot of people pay other people to paint their models for them because they don't want to paint. So if this gets them to maybe paint, great. If it gets beginners to not use all gray armies, great. So, you know, and again, no one's forcing anyone to buy this. So there's no issue, really. I mean, I can understand a little bit of the argument of, well, I've been doing it this way. This is how I learned it. I've been doing it this way for years and years. Everyone should learn it this way. The last part is the only thing I have an issue with. Darth Stormtrooper 108th says, it's shit. I hate it, the new paints, because when you have done it up front, it's not like you did it yourself. The old way, it better than the new lazy people way, so get a girlfriend to paint your ass with the new paints. Thank you very much. I don't know. Darth Trooper 108th, I think you said it the best. Thanks for watching. Look very soon for a how I made my own contrast paints video. Very, very soon, I think. Really soon. So, yeah. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any other questions, put them in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff on Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, the website, everything. Just search for Tiny Plastic Spaceman and you'll find me. Except on Instagram, the name's too long, so it's TPS Painting Studio. Right? So we'll catch you in the next video and see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.